Hello again and welcome to another Mordian Mondays. This is episode 89 and today guys I am super excited because I have reached a significant milestone in clearing my pile of shame. Those of you that have been following Mordian Mondays over the last few weeks will know that I've been making quite the effort to clear out the backlog of all those models and boxes and just stuff that has just been sitting in drawers and not doing much. And I've made a significant milestone because I have painted every single plastic scion model and metal Kazakhin model in my collection. And not only have I painted them, but I've been able to form them into a cohesive, semi-competitive fighting force, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, I did ask last week for suggestions about what this force should be called, what task force name should it be given. And there were many great suggestions, but I decided in the end the one that I'm going to go for, the one that just stood out to me as the best one, the greatest suggestions, was Task Force Icarus. And I love the myth of Icarus, and those of you that don't know about it, please go and check it out. It's an ancient Greek myth, and I just think it's so fitting for Scions because they descend from the sky and they destroy everything around them. And and also leading a bit more into the myth, if you play as a Scions player, you are daring to fly too close to the sun. You're pushing your army to the very limits to try and win. And I just think that is quite similar to the ancient Greek myth of Icarus. So thank you. There were multiple people that suggested that name, and thank you to all of you because it was definitely an absolutely fantastic choice. Really fits the theme of this force. So what I'm going to do today, guys, is I'm going to take you through the whole army. Now, I do want to say that whilst I've completed my backlog, this force isn't 100% completed. There are a couple of units that I want to add to it that will, I think, really flesh it out and take it from just being, oh, I've completed my backlog, to version 2.0, which is not only have I completed my backlog, but I have a really solid, good, take-all-comers, almost edition-proof Scions army. It's got a bit of everything and it can do a bit of everything. It might not be 100% efficient at any one point, but I know that I can pick this army up and take it into battle, and whatever the edition, whatever the battle, I know it'll have a pretty good chance of either going down swinging if it's against a top meta thing, or actually performing quite well in an equal matchup, should we say. Anyway, without further ado, let's get on with what I've painted so far, and then once we've looked at that, I'll talk about what units I'm thinking about adding to the force. So the first of these glory boys, of these big toy soldiers that I want to talk about, are my plasma scions. And I've got 6 of these squads rocking around now. The 6 that you can see are grouped together, sort of to the right hand side. There's also that extra squad that's just to the left in front of the Taurox Prime, but we'll be talking about that in a little bit later. So these plasma scions are the core of Task Force Icarus. They are the take-all comers, and they are equipped to handle any situation because no matter what the edition, plasma has always been a reliable source of consistent damage output. Sometimes melta has been more efficient than it, sometimes grav has been more efficient than it, sometimes plasma has been the most efficient choice, but no matter what, plasma guns in the hands of Scions have always been a good choice. And so the first element of the core of this force is the plasma scions. I've got 6 squads of them, 5 men in each one, 2 hotshot las guns or hell guns in each squad, 2 plasma guns in each squad, and then I've got a sergeant. Now, all of these sergeants have been built with 9th edition and 8th edition in mind, and they have all got plasma pistols and chainswords. And the idea of these guys is they can perform any role I need them to. Do I need some units to start off on the board inside the Taurox Primes? Okay, we've got some plasma scions. They can jump out, they can do long range plasma shots, they can jump out closer to the enemy and as part of an assault and jump into rapid fire range. They just work really well. And the sergeants have all got plasma pistols. Now at the moment, plasma pistols are free for Scion squads. That will probably change in the future, but at the moment they are free. Even so, if it does change and I don't have to pay sort of 5 points for them, I probably still will do that. But I definitely will do that, because if you're going to have a plasma squad with double plasma gun, it's actually not a bad idea to have that extra plasma shot from the sergeant. Otherwise, he's either having to be a grenade caddy, which he can't do from deep strike, or he's having to use a bolt pistol, which isn't very good, or he's having to use a hotshot las pistol, which again, you know, you can't deep strike and is not really a great choice. So these guys can either start off in the Taurox primes, they can be part of the ground pounders, and typically when I am running my pure scion army, that's the role they tend to take, because it means they can shoot from long range or close range. But if the need arises, and I need to perform, you know, a big deep strike, and I want to be able to deep strike these plasma boys in rapid fire range, then they can do that as well. So, and if they need to jump out of Valkyries, they can do that as well. They are just the take-all-comers core of this force, and I really like them. Now, in terms of the models that have been used for these guys, as you can see, all the plasma guns are from the standard Scion kit. In an attempt to try and avoid them all being an identical pose, I have the arm that is holding the plasma gun, I've put that at different angles. And the other arm, which normally has a pointing hand, I've equipped them with various different weapons. So some of them have got the pointing hand, some of them are using different pistols. What I like to do is use a plasma pistol arm, because then if anyone asks, like, it's like, oh well, he hasn't got a plasma pistol, but he's just aiming a plasma weapon, you know. So it's just that whole guy is plasma basically, and I've had no issues, even though WYSIWYG wise or rules as written wise, you can't give them pistols and stuff like that. No one has ever questioned it, because they've all got plasma guns, and they, you know, it's easy to see that. Now, there's a mixture, in terms of the riflemen, there's a mixture of Kazakin here and the Scion riflemen. You may notice some of the Kazakin have actually got the new current Scion backpacks. I think one of them's got a Voxcaster backpack, and a couple of them have got the backpack with the sort of material roll on top. That is because out of, you know, many of these Kazakin, again, well, nearly all of them have been bought second hand. And some of them, when you buy them from eBay lots, the backpacks have been lost. But what I found really interesting is actually the current Scion backpack glues perfectly onto the Scion, onto the Kazakin back. So that's really, really interesting. So did it make a difference in the end? I was a bit worried about having to use different backpacks and whether I'd be able to rescue them or not, but as it turned out, it wasn't a problem. So yeah, that forms the core of the force. We'll now move on to some of the other elements of Task Force Icarus. So here we move on to another classic Scion choice. It is drop melta, suicide melta, guys. If you could consider the first group of guys as platoon 1 as the ground pounders, then these guys you could consider platoon 2, and they are a bit more like the ODST from Halo. They're going to drop in, smash the entire area, kill anything with more than 2 legs, kind of thing. And their job is basically to drop in and just conduct a surgical strike, and that's why they have melta guns. They need to get close with those melta guns, and the best way to do that is to do a fast rope in from a Valkyrie or to grav shoot down. So in part of this force, we've got 2 Scion squads with 2 melta guns and a plasma pistol sergeant. Again, they're free at the moment in 9th edition, but also if you're going to try and melt something, it's always good to have a cheeky overcharged plasma shot as backup. And then we've also got 2 command squads here with a boatload of melta in there as well. So I do have, I think, slightly more plasma than I do have melta, because I've got 10 melta guns overall here, and I had 12 plasma guns overall in the other sort of force. But yeah, these guys, like I said, their job is to perform a surgical strike. Again, these are all made up. All the melta guns are from the standard Scion kit. Didn't need to do any conversion. I just happened to have enough bits and bobs and models and whatnot over in the backlog and over the course of rescues and whatnot, and multiple job lots and things like that. So loads of all these are original models. And in terms of the riflemen, as you can see, we've just got 4 Kazakin in the back there. And again, you can see one of those Kazakin has had his backpack replaced with one from the current Scion kit, because he was missing it, unfortunately for him. But as you can see, it actually fits in really, really well. Now, speaking of that last command squad, the one with the flamers, basically, these guys are a bit of a holdover from 7th edition. You see, back in the day, when I used to run these guys as just a small 500-point combat patrol, having flamer scions was actually pretty legitimate, because you could drop in, and you could drop in within flamer template range, because you didn't used to just have an 8-inch range or now a 12-inch range. You used to drop in and just be able to flame some stuff. It was a bit risky because you didn't used to be able to do precise drops. There was a risk you would scatter off, and if you did, men would die or the drop would fail. But these guys are a bit of a holdover from there. So I haven't used them much. I didn't use them at all in 8th edition, for the simple fact that flamers in 8th edition were just, you couldn't deep strike with them. They were terrible. And you didn't really want to be putting flamers on scions because they had a good ballistic skill in in 8th edition with the way they changed ballistic skill and whatnot. But now in 9th edition, I'm starting to look upon these guys a little bit more favourably, because obviously they've got the range now, so they've got a 12-inch range, and Land and Lions means that they're AP -1. So actually, Flamer Drop Command Squad is quite a cheap way. It's 60 points to just drop in 4 AP -1 flamers. It's not a terrible use of them, but realistically, if I was going to take this force super competitively, I would probably drop in another Melta Command Squad, because having 3 Melta Command Squads drop in with a Tempestus Prime, if you can get in against the target you want to delete, you're going to delete it, because all of those Meltas you can Elimination Protocol sanctioned, and you can just drop in and you can be like, right, 12 Melta guns, I'm going to get 8 hits, and I'm going to have full rerolls to wound against the target that I want to kill. Even against like toughness 8 stuff, you're looking at 6 wounds going through there, and if the enemy has an invulnerable save, typically they'll probably like a 5-up or something like a knight or whatever, you're still going to get 4 of those Melta guns through, and you're going to absolutely, you're going to degrade that knight, you're going to nuke it. And if it hasn't got an invulnerable save, then he's taking 66. And that's a lot of damage. That is going to give anyone a headache. Or you can drop these guys in against elite infantry. I mean, if you've got someone who's got a bit of a death ball going on, and the damage from the plasma just isn't quite cutting it, maybe you're looking at like Death Shroud Terminators or something similar. 12 Melta guns dropping in is going to delete a squad of Death Shroud Terminators. It's going to have a good time. You can combine these guys with also the reroll 1s aura from like the Land and Lions commander if you want to. But yeah, they've got a good thing going on there. You just can't go wrong with a bit of drop Melta, and like I said, their job is surgical strike. So yeah, pretty classic really. We'll move on to the next bunch of units now. So, moving on to the last major group of infantry, we have the main anti-infantry element. If the plasma guys are there to take on anything and the melta guys are there to do a surgical strike against a big, horrible target, then these guys are here to clear the hordes. 4 squads, each one with double hotshot volley gun. There's a lot of volley gun fire there. There's 8 volley gun shots from each one of those squads. That is 32 volley gun shots. Combine that with, you've got the potential for first rank, fast, second rank fire in all of those squads for an additional 4 shots per guy on those riflemen at the back. You are looking at potentially for 16 shots from each one of these squads. It's a lot of anti-infantry firepower, and you don't forget you've also got the classic free plasma pistol as well. So generally speaking, I like to take these squads when I'm experimenting with Capic Eagles. Now, when 9th edition first came out, Capic Eagles was certainly the equal to Lambda Lions. But as the inevitable march continues, and we are experiencing, as I've talked about last week, we are experiencing power creep. Unfortunately, these squads have fallen a little bit by the wayside. I've just found that when I'm shooting something with my scions, I really need AP -3 minimum. I really need that. And unfortunately, being Capic Eagles, these guys would only get AP -2. Now, I haven't tried really trying to make volley guns work in a Land and Lions detachment. I'm a little sceptical about that, simply because obviously they've only got, if you move with them, you're only hitting on 4s, which isn't great. But they're not the end of the world. They're still good. Like I said, they're still a good source of firepower. What I'll tend to run, if I'm running these guys in my Land and Lions attachment, what I'll tend to do with them is 2 rolls. Either they will be, they're only, they're very cheap. They're only 55 points for each one of these squads. And either they'll deep strike in and they'll do like a rod, or they'll get me and engage. And if they do a rod and then they survive, then typically they can stay still after that, and they can fire the hotshot volley guns at range. Because the great thing about hotshot volley guns is that they're 4 shots at every range. So if they do, you can actually use these as a little bit of long range fire support. So I do quite like these squads. I haven't really tried making them work in my Land of Lions yet, but I definitely think there could be some potential for them to work there. And again, hitting on 4s isn't the end of the world. You're still going to be pumping out a pretty decent amount of shots with these guys. And hotshot volley guns are pretty good. So yeah, that is what I tend to use these guys for. A bit of anti-infantry clearance, bit of engage, bit of rod, because taking a bare bones scion squad, what I've found is you take a bare bones scion squad and it does its objective. Then if it dies, like fine, it dies. But if it lives, it doesn't really achieve much after that, because it's just got hotshot lasguns. Whereas spending 10 points on those squads does give them a bit of an extra lease on life. It gives them a bit more tactical flexibility. Okay, we've dropped in, we've retrieved the Octuarius data. Now we actually have some firepower to contribute to this fight. So they are quite good, but yeah, they do struggle a little bit. Hotshot volley guns really need to be made assault for. They really need to be made assault for. You need to be able to move and shoot any weapon in the Scion army that you can't run and gun with. It just doesn't feel right. It feels out of place. And the big reason for that is Scions are a mobile army. They are. So I did build plenty of these guys up as a sort of what if situation. I have been experimenting with them. They do okay, but I think realistically, having more plasma guns would probably be better. But it would cost me 40 more points to do that. So who knows? So these guys are absolutely fine. Like I said, I run them as tend to run them on Captive Eagles, but I'm preferring Land of Lions massively at the moment. But there may be some areas for exploration in terms of running them as Land of Lions and just biting the bullet for when you take that -1. Really like these guys. I love hotshot volley guns. I love that they're unique to Scions. I just wish that they were a little bit better. Games Workshop, please make them Assault 4. It would be such a simple change, but it would really, really improve them. So moving on now, we've just got the last of the regular Scion infantry, and this is just this little 5-man squad you can see to the right here. Now, you'll notice that these guys do not have a legal loadout. There is a sergeant there with a dagger, but then I've got 2 grenade launchers, I've got a flamer, and I've got a hotshot volley gun. Simple reality is, guys, that these are leftover models. When you have got a lot of your Scions, especially the Kazakin models, from various rescues and second-hand and whatnot, you're inevitably going to be left with some leftovers, and that's what these guys are really. So it's just a couple of Scion grenade launchers. Kazakin grenade launcher. Got a Kazakin flamer there as well, and I've got another volley gun, and I've got a sergeant. These guys, when I said I was going to paint every single one of them, I painted every single one of them. And who knows? Land on line grenade launchers aren't too bad, but as I mentioned before, 8-2 doesn't really cut it. I've got an extra flamer, I've got an extra volley gun, it is what it is. And I've got an extra sergeant. Now, I also mentioned before, when I was talking about the Take All Comers plasma squads, that there was that additional squad that was on the left, and I'd circle back round to that. They're also a bit of a leftover squad. You see, that squad did have 5 men in it, and it did have 2 special weapons and 2 riflemen, so totally legal loadout. But it had 1 melta and 1 plasma. So you see, I don't like mixing and matching special weapons. Maybe it's a bit of OCD. Maybe it's just born through playing Scions with experience, and you need to specialize your units or homogenize their weapon loadouts. So I don't really like that squad, but it is essentially an extra squad. If I need an extra special weapon squad, I've got one, and it's got decent special weapons. It's got an extra melta. It's got an extra plasma. It can do the beans if it needs to, do the business. However, now that I have got all of my backlog painted up, my intention is actually to get an extra box of Scions. And then with that extra box of Scions, I'm going to round out that squad. So I will have an additional melta squad, and I'll have an additional plasma squad. And I'll have a couple of riflemen left over from that. And with that, I will probably build them as riflemen, and that will allow me to run another squad, which could be, you know, using these spare models as well, which would essentially give me an extra couple of, you know, grenade launcher squad there. I mean, I'm unlikely to run a volley gun flamer combo squad, you know what I mean? But it would give me an extra grenade launcher squad. So there we go. That's what I'm probably going to end up doing. It just gives me some flexibility, in all fairness, having that extra squad. But like I said, these are just spare models, and again, you can see most of them are, you know, actually these are a bit more converted. So that sergeant is quite heavily converted because he's using the dagger from that's the officer's dagger, and then one of the grenade launchers has got a scion backpack, and then the hotshot volley gun. Again, that's actually quite heavily converted because I ran out of backpacks that are specific for the volley gun cable, so I had to sort of convert one over a little bit, and yeah, it was all a bit funny. I imagine when I built some of my first scions, I didn't really pay attention to which hands went with which weapons and whatnot, so that's why this guy's got a bit of a mismatch of parts, but he works, right? He's an extra volley gun guy. So yeah, like I said, my intention is to try and round out these squads. I'm not sure how far I'll take it, because I'm probably not going to buy an extra box just to get an extra flamer to try and round out an extra flamer squad, for example. But you know, these guys are now painted up, and if for some reason flamers become amazing, I've got an extra one here. You know, so there you go. So that is kind of all the infantry talked about. We'll do a quick overview of some of the sort of remaining elements in the army. So moving away from the infantry, we have the mechanised, or I like to almost call it motorised corps of the Scions. You see, to me, mechanised implies big APCs. I'm thinking Bradleys, BMPs, Warriors, stuff like that. That's your big APCs. Or in, you know, the Warhammer universe, we're thinking Chimeras, we're thinking Rhinos and Razorbacks, stuff like that. Whereas I almost feel Tauroxes are almost more motorised. No, they've got, you know, that's just what they feel like to me. I know they've got those silly little micro tracks, but they feel more motorised to me. So this is the ground pounding element, and I've got 3 Taurox primes. They're all equipped with Daka weapons, so I've got 3 Gatling guns and I've got double volley gun on each one. I do probably have the bits painted, you know, in the bits box for the missile launchers, but I've always found that I prefer the Daka primes over the punchy primes and the missile launchers. They're cheaper, and they bring something to the army, especially in 9th edition, that is lacking, which is anti-infantry, which doesn't hit on 4s. So obviously the plasma can do a bit of everything, and the melta can do a bit of everything, but the volley guns on the infantry, unless they're running Catholic Eagles, they don't hit very well because they're heavy weapons volley guns. Whereas on these guys, we are looking at 28 Daka shots, 20 AP-1 strength 4 shots from the Gatling guns, and then another 8 volley gun shots. And yeah, these guys really bring a significant amount of anti-infantry to my force. Now I've had these painted up for a while, and now I've completed the rest of the infantry. My intention here is to actually get 2 more Taurox primes, and again to equip them as Daka primes. And I think that will give me a bit of redundancy. You see, at the moment, I'm finding 3 isn't enough. I don't think 3 is enough. I need more than 3 vehicles in the army, and I find that the 2 Valkyries, which obviously you saw at the on the overview picture, they're okay, but they don't really put out enough firepower. I mean, they've got some rocket pods and heavy bolters and whatnot, but I don't feel like they put out enough firepower. So I would prefer to take more Taurox primes. And so that's the plan. So I'm going to get a couple more Taurox primes at least, and that should give me 5. Now, if I end up expanding this army and taking it a little bit further, then probably that it needs to, but if I really end up expanding this army, I'd probably get 2 more start collecting kits of Scions, which would give me another 2 Taurox primes, which would mean I would have 7, which is a lot of Taurox primes. Okay, now 7, because I'd have the 2 that I'd buy independently, which I want. I don't need any more infantry at this time. And then I would get, if I was to expand it, I'd look at getting 7 Taurox primes. Now 7 Taurox primes is a lot, and I probably would. Well, depending on how points change over editions, I may end up using all 7 of them. But if I was to get 7 Taurox primes, I'd more than likely equip the last 2 as punchy primes. Because even though I prefer Dakka primes, if I'm going down a route of just massive amounts of motorized elements, having a couple of long-range missile bastards isn't too bad. So yeah, definitely that's, you know, open for consideration. But right now I'm thinking I want 2 more Taurox primes. I want them to have Dakka, and then that will give me 5 Taurox primes, 2 Valkyries, and, you know, a lot of infantry. Probably close to 100 infantry, roughly. I'm thinking, what, we've got 30 in each platoon, roughly. There's about 30 in each platoon, roughly. So it's, you know, about 80 to 90 infantry in the force. So yeah, so that's it. We've obviously already talked about the Valkyries in the overview picture. They're pretty standard. We've talked about the Taurox primes now. So the last thing to talk about is going to be the leaders. So here we have the leadership elements of Task Force Icarus. 3 Tempestus primes and an Inquisitor. Oh yeah, love a good Inquisitor. Can't go wrong with having an Inquisitor as part of a Scion force. We'll be talking about him in a little bit. But let's talk about those Scion primes first. So each one of these has got command rod and they've got a close combat weapon. They come with the knives. And I've given one a converted one to a power sword. But I'm never going to use it as a power sword. That's why I've painted it silver. I've not painted it in like blue or anything. And I run these guys as command rod and chainsword because why wouldn't you? It's cheap because these guys have one job, which is to do orders. Because as great as Scions are, they do need some order support. Now, each one of these guys can do 2 orders thanks to the command rod. And then you can also get an extra order via Master of Command. So that means you can do 7, and then you can use the Auto Reliquary of Tiberius, which is a relic that lets you get an extra order on a 2+. And then you can also do an extra order for a command point for inspired tactics. So these guys can pump out 9 orders when they need to. Now, obviously, to address the elephant in the room, if I were to run this force as like a legal detachment, I'd probably need to run it as 2 battalions. And in which case, I don't have enough HQ choices here because the Inquisitor doesn't count. So what I tend to do, if I need an extra HQ choice, if I'm running 2 battalions, then what I tend to do is either use Commissar Yarrick, because he's got a reroll 1 Zora buff, and that's quite good, especially with Plasma Scions and whatnot. It means you have 2 reroll order buffs in the army. Or I'll sub in just a regular old Lord Commissar from my Mordian 50 rifles. Now, he will look like a Lord Commissar, so he'll do the business. The only snag with that, you could say, is the basing for my Mordian 50 rifles is like a brown, earthy base coat, whereas for my Scions, it's obviously the urban astrogranite. My intention is to probably, at some point in the future, convert one of my backlog of commissars over so these guys have their own commissar with the right basing. But at the moment, I actually don't mind too much that the basing is different, because it kind of shows my opponent that he stands out a little bit, because obviously he's got a black trench coat, so he's going to look very similar to all the black in the rest of the army. But it also shows that he hasn't got the same regiment trait as the rest of them, because Lord Commissars don't get that. So it does help a little bit. But to be honest, the intention is, when I expand this army somewhat, is to give them a commissar, and I actually have one ready and rolling, ready and waiting in the backlog, ready to convert over. It's actually an old Valhallan commander that I got when they did the made to order, and I'm probably going to use him as a Lord Commissar for this force. It'll be cool, and it'll give this force just a little bit of retro flavour. So that's the commanders. Now, talking about the Inquisitor. Now, this is the Inquisitor Cotiers model, and he is an absolute bad man. I really like Inquisitor Cotiers. He comes with a mastercrafted Nemesis Demon Hammer. He can spit out loads of mortal wounds. He has a thing where if you deep strike near him, and he's near some friendly units, and you get like free Auspex scan or some crazy stuff. I haven't checked his rules in a long time. To be fair, I've had this model for a long time, and he was looking a bit battered, so I touched up his paint scheme a little bit and thought, you know what, I'll include him in this force, because I have an Ordo Malleus Inquisitor already. I've got the old Demon Hunter one with the big buck, but again, he's painted a bit like the Lord Commissar. He's painted up to go with my Mordian 50 rifles, and so I wanted one that would fit in with my scions, and then I've actually got 2 inquisitors. And I was thinking of developing some lore around this, where they're 2 inquisitors. They're kind of 2 rivals, but it's like a friendly rivalry. That it's a professional rivalry rather than a negative rivalry, and they both have different approaches to how they think an inquisitor should handle situations. One of them believes in the more traditional inquisitor way, that you should act from the shadows, and you should use elite strike forces and not involve the wider Imperium as best as you can, and all that kind of stuff. Ignorance is bliss and all that kind of stuff. And that's the inquisitor we've got here with these guys, and he basically leads these scion forces to do surgical strikes and to eliminate threats to the Imperium before they get too strong or before they emerge. The other one is the one that goes with Mordian infantry rifles, and he believes in a totally different approach. He's like, I am an inquisitor, I can call upon as many resources as I need to, and that is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to call upon the greatest and most abundant resource that the Imperium has, which is the Imperial Guard. It's an unlimited source of men, from veterans to infantry to whatever. It's an unlimited source of men, and the best way to stamp out heresy and Xenos and all sort of scum is to grind it out under relentless force. And that's what my other Inquisitor believes in. And that's why he is part of the Mordian 50th Rifles. And that's why he is part of that regiment which believes in just waves upon waves of infantry. That's how he pulls the strings there. So I just thought it's kind of cool to have these 2 opposing, is it like a dichotomy is the word, or like a paradox? It's these two paradoxical opposing natures, but it's a friendly rivalry. They're both Malleus Inquisitors at the end of the day. So I haven't got a name for this Inquisitor. I wouldn't actually run him as Courtiers. I'd probably just run him as a standard double smite Inquisitor. And if I did run him as Courtiers with Courtiers rules, I wouldn't have him as with the name Courtiers. So if anyone's got any cool names that they think would be good for this guy, that would fit in with maybe the Icarus theme. The one thing I would maybe choose for him is I'd go for a reference to the fantasy novels, the Third Law trilogy. If you haven't read them, they're really, really good. They're a bit like Game of Thrones, but I don't know. I would put, personal opinion, I think they're better than Game of Thrones, especially the original trilogy. And there is an Inquisitor in that trilogy called Inquisitor Glotka, and I really, really like his character. Is my favourite character from those books. And so I might actually call this guy Inquisitor Glotka, but if anyone else has got any suggestions, please let me know, because you guys, I'm always up for cool suggestions for stuff. So that is the overview of Task Force Icarus. I hope you guys have liked me going through it element by element. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to throw up some army overview pictures. They're going to go through in a bit of a cycle, and then I'll just chat some shit for 5 minutes, and we'll probably call it there. But yeah, let's end the official walkthrough step-by-step part, and we'll move on to just the general chatting. So that is the whole force. The backlog is completely cleared. But what is next for this army, for Task Force Icarus? Well, like I said, there's a few extra models I want to get. Like I want an extra box of Scions. I want to get a commissar specific for this force. And maybe a couple of extra Taurox primes. And I feel that would round it out quite nicely. But there is something that is missing from this army, which is a close combat element. Now, as part of taking my Scions to tournaments recently, I have been making up for that close combat element by running a full Bulgrin bomb, and that's been, it's been doing alright. I've had some success with that. But those Bulgrins are part of my Mordian 50th Rifles. They're painted up to match that. And I want something that would be unique to this army. And I think what I want to do is add a big blob of Crusaders to this force, and maybe a priest to go with them as well. So I think that would look really, really cool, because the Bulgrins, they are big and they're designed to smash everything. Scions are a little bit more finesse, I tend to find. Like we've got surgical strikes, we've got some plasma. There's no big sledgehammers. They're not meant to be sledgehammers. They're meant to be a surgical scalpel. And so I think Crusaders would fit that theme a little bit more, where I think in terms of visuals, having a group of 10 guys armed with power swords and shields, and it's a small elite combat element. I think would work really, really well. Now, that works for me visually, it works for me lore-wise for this army. I also think tactically it would be really good as well. You see, the Scions are going to do most of their damage via shooting. But there are units in the 40k game which you can only do a certain number of wounds to them per phase. Now, the Inquisitor obviously helps me double smite them, which helps me do wounds in the psychic phase, but I don't have a great chance of doing wounds in the combat phase. Maybe charging in with a squad of Scions and that's on like 1 wound or something, but it's not ideal. So I think having a unit of Crusaders is a cheap way of adding that combat element to the army. A squad of 10 Crusaders is only 160 points. Compare that to a full Bulgrim blob, which is double that. Well, it's just under, it's 315 points, but it's double that. And the Bulgrims are great and they do a good job and that's fine, but I don't need them to be that expensive. I need a unit that can go in there and reliably do like 3 or 4 wounds in the combat phase against something like a Void Dragon or whatnot. And I think Crusaders, if you have a priest with them, they get 3 attacks each. That would be like 30 attacks. They hit on 3s, so you're going to get like 20 hits, and then they wound on 5s. To be fair, so you're looking at what, like roughly, let's say 6 or 7. Let's say 7 wounds. Now you're going to push a lot of things onto an invulnerable save because they've all got power swords, right? So if you put them on, so 7 wounds there means if you're fighting like a Void Dragon, which got like I think it's got a 4th invulnerable save, and you need to do 3 wounds to it in 1 phase. Well, 7 wounds gives you a greater than a greater chance. It's more than likely it's going to fail 3 out of 7 wounds, and that's enough. That's enough. That's all I need it to do. And likewise, if I'm facing like Gazgul, who I think has a 5 invulnerable save, again, he's that's likely to get 4 wounds through onto him. Very similar odds kind of thing. So, and the good thing about Crusaders is that they can, they've all got 4th invulnerable saves, so if you get them into combat, they're likely to be able to stick it out for a round. And they have the old prayers, which means that if I don't quite kill what I need to kill in my combat phase, if the Crusaders can survive the counterpunch, on a 2+, I can either bring a Crusader back, or I can simply just attack with them in the movement phase. I think it is, or something crazy. It's really quite good. So they've got a bit of versatility and they're cheap. Now there is a few things. You do have to spend some points. We have to do the 106. We have to pay for the priest. If you want them to have a 3+ invulnerable save, you're going to have to spend points like an Astropath or another Psyker, for example. But I probably wouldn't do that because, like I said, these guys are not there to be a roadblock or anything like that. They've lost that. That's not their primary purpose anymore. When they had a 2+ invulnerable save, yeah, sure, great, I'd definitely do that. But when they've only got a 3+ max, I'm kind of tempted to just see them as a good source of just attacks, of power sword strength 4 attacks, which are going to be 8 masteries. They're going to be kicking people down onto invulnerable saves 99% of the time. So that's kind of where I see them. And one thing I've been noticing with my Bulgrins is they're fantastic at like bullying units, but the moment that they come across something like a Storm Shield, which is quite common, they totally flub. Because Storm Shields they give people +1 to their armor save. So when you've come across a bunch of like Terminators and Storm Shields, it's like, you're on a 2-up save, and there's nothing I can do about that. Even with my AP -1, there's nothing I can do about that. Whereas your Crusaders would be like, okay, fine, but I'm going to be putting you down to a 4th invulnerable save easily in a similar situation. And likewise, the Terminators will kill the Bulgrins with every wound that goes through because they're damage 3 with those Thunderhammers, whereas a Crusader it's same, but it's overkill. So I'm definitely thinking potentially there's some scope for Crusaders here. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm thinking. If I was to expand the force, like I said, I'd get a couple more boxes of I'd get a couple more start collecting sets, which would give me all the Taurox primes I'd need. I'd have more infantry than I would possibly want. I'd have more plasma and melta and everything. and then, like I said, a squad of 10 Crusaders. And I think what you've got there is just a completed army. You don't need to touch that again. You know, that's it. That's everything you're going to possibly need across the editions. Yes, they could bring out like a new kit with new weapon options, but other than that, you know, you've got what you need for every edition and every eventuality. So yeah, there we go. I think we'll wrap the video there now. It's gone on it's a good army overview. It's gone on a while now. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I want to say a massive thank you to my Patreon supporters. It's thanks to my Patreon supporters that I've been able to really, you know, flesh this army out, clear through the backlog, get all the paints and equipment and stuff that I've needed in order to you know, bring this army up to where it is. So massive thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys are absolutely fantastic. If you want to become a Patreon supporter, there's a link down in the description below. I don't do anything silly with like levels, you know, spend $10 or you can do anything like that. I don't mess around with it. It's just a case of if you feel like throwing a couple of extra dollars my way, that's absolutely fantastic and I really appreciate it. So we'll leave it there. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and of course, we'll see you guys next time.